Today in Agronomy on KFIL AM 1060 with Pioneer Field Agronomist Allie Wise and Josh Schaffner. Here's Josh and Allie.
Southeast Minnesota. Today is September 9th. Josh, this is episode number 39. Cooled off a little bit as we moved in to this week compared to what we've experienced these past weeks. So definitely.
I think that's an understatement. It's cold.
Yeah. But as we come down the stretch here, I think, good to talk about maybe what some of this cool weather means and just other factors as we come down the stretch that we want to be keeping top of mind. But for starters on the weather side of thing, maybe just a quick GDU update and what we project to maybe pick up average-wise as we progress through these weeks.
Yeah, we're getting close. So if we continue to, we've been using Preston, Minnesota here for our GDU calculator starting at April 20th. As of yesterday, we're sitting at 2,263. That is 38 behind the average. Allie, yesterday I was down in Caledonia. We're doing a little plot tour there and had a bunch of growers come in. And, a couple of people commented when I mentioned we were just a little behind on GDUs. They're like, I can't believe that. I don't know how we can be behind, and sometimes when you just look at year over year compared to last year, Allie, we are way ahead. We're probably plus 230 or 40 over a year ago. And even compared to average, one thing that's really helping us, Allie, is just the really early planting dates. And I also think we've had much better solar radiation and sunlight down the stretch. I think just the amount of sunny days is maybe pushing this crop just a tick faster than GDUs might be predicting. But with that said, Allie, it's usually 2,400 gets 100-day relative maturity to black layer. And, I guess just kind of basing on that, I think we're pretty close.
Yeah, so you look at when you get to black layer, sitting around 35% moisture. So I think probably the biggest gray area is that as we cool down here, you definitely have some ebbs and flows in terms of the number of GDUs that you're picking up a day. So a little harder to predict when we'll get that down to a harvestable moisture level. But nonetheless, like you said, we are well ahead of last year, and it's just crazy to sit here today, really just a nice spot to be sitting maturity-wise versus last year. We were just hoping we could get that crop to maturity before that killing freeze came into play. So drastically different year, but I think it also reminds us why we don't want to sway too far one way or another on the corn maturity pendulum, just kind of live in our sweet spot, and
for sure
it can be different from year to year.
And yesterday I was excited. I think we just barely got to a high of 52, so we scored one GDU yesterday, and today I'm not quite sure if we're going to get there. It could be we might get blanked, but takes 100 GDUs to drop the milk line a 0.25% at our current rate. It's going to take us 100 days just to drop a quarter, Allie. So hopefully we got warmer days to come.
Yeah, that's not very positive there, Josh, but it does look like as we move into, once we get through this week, this kind of cold spell, I think the 15-day actually looks pretty respectable. So don't get too caught up in this little cold snap here.
For sure.
But outside of weather, I think it is important, like we mentioned, harvest is coming in a lot sooner than last year. And there are some things that as we're out walking fields right now that we're really keeping a closer eye on. And always good to have a plan as you come into harvest. And I think one of those things is just going to be keeping an eye on some of these stocks as we continue to progress and making sure that you have a handle on what that harvest order should look like. Just any general comments around kind of stock quality as we come down the stretch here?
Yeah, we're just kind of getting to a point where you can maybe, if you're walking fields and pushing stocks, you can already start to tell where there's going to be some challenges. There can be some hybrid differences genetically. However, on this given year, you're probably going to find every hybrid that might have a challenge just from some of the stress that we dealt with down the stretch. And really, it's going to be two things. Number one, moisture stress, where some things got shut down a little bit early, Allie. That's going to be something we got to watch. Also, the last 10, 12 days, you've maybe been able to drive around and see some of those tops of some fields really firing up from the bottom. Some of that could be heavily related to some nitrogen or some nutrient deficiencies down the stretch. But I think those fields that are really looking yellow a little bit earlier, on top of those ones that were a little bit moisture stressed, Allie, I think you're going to want to keep a close eye on those stocks in those two situations down the stretch.
Well, yeah, and it's kind of that compounding factor between the nutrient availability and those dry spells in different pockets coming down the stretch. And you look at, that corn plant's starting to pull all those nutrients to the ear from both directions. And especially as I'm walking some of these earlier maturities that are way closer to black layer, those are the ones that I'm maybe noticing a little bit more stalk integrity degradation over some of those fuller seasons, which are still holding on just due to their later maturities.
Yeah, and that's a great point we talked about is we're pulling those tops of the plant down along with the bottoms coming up there a little bit, and in some cases where we've had some of that stress or we got that nitrogen stress, the plant's going to try to finish that ear in one shape or form, and if it can't get it supplied from the soil, which in some cases we're just running out of gas, it's going to find a way to try to finish that between those mobilization of nutrients and photosynthates. We've seen some fields, I think, almost mature a little bit early, Allie. In some cases, I've even seen fields that maybe didn't, drop ears just from moisture stress. They actually dropped ears from some nutrition stress down the stretch. But those are going to be the fields you want to watch the closest for sure, Allie, from a stock standpoint down the stretch. And I don't want to be worrying about a harvest plan yet. It seems a little early, but at the same time, scouting those fields here over the next 10 days is going to be really important.